Imagine the scene. It's late, the children are asleep, the house is quiet except for the low murmur of the radio. Then, a sound begins to build in the distance. A mournful, rising and falling wail that cuts through the night. That sound meant one thing: death was falling from the sky. In that instant, adrenaline floods your system. Every nerve ending is on fire. And you had minutes, maybe less, to make a series of critical decisions. Decisions that would determine if your family lived or died. This wasn't a one-time event. This was the nightly, terrifying reality for millions of ordinary people during the Blitz. For 57 consecutive nights, and then intermittently for months, cities were pounded from above. Faced with this relentless onslaught, they didn't just cower in fear. They learned, through terrible trial and error, a system to survive. A practical, repeatable, life-saving doctrine created not by generals, but by grocers, teachers, and parents. This isn't a story of military strategy, of Spitfires and Messerschmitts dueling in the clouds. It's a story of civilian ingenuity, of a battle fought house by house, street by street, with buckets of sand and rolls of tape. Faced with unimaginable terror, ordinary people, guided by government pamphlets and their own harsh experience, developed a layered survival plan. This plan was a sequence of automatic actions, a checklist burned into their minds. A plan that started the moment the siren sounded and didn't end until the blessed relief of the all clear was given. Layer 1 was about securing the immediate environment. The home itself was now a potential enemy. You had maybe 30 seconds to a minute before the first bombs fell. Every action was rehearsed, every movement precise. There was no time for hesitation. First, windows. Closing and locking windows made them less likely to shatter inward from the pressure wave of a nearby explosion. An open window was a guaranteed spray of glass shrapnel. Next, water. Filling the bathtub and any available buckets was your emergency water supply. Not just for drinking if the mains were hit, but crucially, for firefighting. Then, gas. Turning off the gas at the main valve was absolutely critical. A bomb could rupture pipes blocks away, and a leak could fill your home with flammable gas, turning it into a secondary bomb. Finally, electricity. If you had time, you'd kill the power at the mains. Damaged wiring from the shaking of the house could easily cause a fire in the walls, a hidden killer that would emerge long after the raid. These were simple, drilled-in actions. A 30-second dance with death that could prevent a disaster within a disaster, giving your family a fighting chance before you even took cover. With the house secured, the next layer was personal protection. Where you sheltered was everything. The ideal was a dedicated shelter. For those with a garden, this was the Anderson shelter, a cage of corrugated iron, dug 3 feet into the ground and covered with earth. It was damp, cold, and cramped, but it saved countless lives from anything but a direct hit. But for many, especially in dense urban areas, the shelter was inside the house. The safest place was an interior room, a hallway, or the cupboard under the stairs. The goal was simple physics: put as many walls and as much structural mass between you and the outside as possible. Each wall could potentially absorb the energy of a blast or stop flying debris. For those sheltering indoors, the government issued the Morrison shelter. This was a heavy steel cage, the size of a large dining table. Families would sleep inside it every night. It wouldn't stop a direct hit, but it could withstand the complete collapse of the upper floors of a house. This wasn't about comfort. It was about creating a survivable void. A small pocket of space within a collapsing structure, where the weight of the rubble would be held up by the shelter, giving rescuers a chance to find you. The next layer of defense was a collective one. Light was a killer. From 20,000 feet, a blacked-out city was nearly invisible. But a single chink of light from one careless window could act as a perfect aiming point, leading a bomber to an entire city block. So civilians became masters of the blackout. This wasn't just pinning a blanket over the window. They used specially designed wooden frames, fitted with heavy, light-proof fabric. ensuring not a single photon could escape. This wasn't just a regulation enforced by the stern air raid wardens patrolling the streets. It was a deeply felt communal survival pact. Your neighbor's life depended on your light discipline, and yours on theirs. It was a profound, shared responsibility that forged communities in the darkness. But the danger wasn't over when the bombs stopped falling. In many ways, the most dangerous phase was just beginning. The immediate aftermath was a treacherous landscape of new threats. Raging fires from incendiary bombs, streets littered with razor-sharp glass, and the silent, invisible danger of gas leaks. This is where the next layer came in: active defense. Every street had a fire watch, often teenagers or older residents, stationed on rooftops to spot where the small, thermite-filled incendiary bombs landed. And in every home, they had a kit ready for this fight. Buckets of sand to smother a fire, a shovel, and a first aid kit. The stirrup pump was the star of this kit, a simple, hand-operated device. One person would place the pump in a bucket of water, holding it steady with their foot, while another directed the nozzle. It could pump a continuous stream of water high enough to reach a fire in the attic, dousing an incendiary bomb before it could burn the house down. Another simple but brilliant tactic was taping windows. This was widely misunderstood. The tape didn't stop the glass from breaking. What it did was hold the broken pieces together, preventing the glass from exploding into thousands of lethal, high-velocity shards that could kill someone across the room. The final, and perhaps most important layer of this entire system was psychological. The physical danger was immense, but the mental strain was constant. The nightly fear, the jarring explosions, the loss of sleep. It was a form of psychological warfare designed to break a nation's will. The constant fear was paralyzing. Civilians fought back with the powerful weapon of routine. They imposed order on the chaos. Every family had a shelter bag, always packed and ready by the door. Inside was a thermos of hot, sweet tea, a book, a deck of cards, some biscuits, and for a child, their favorite teddy bear. These small items were anchors to civilization, making tea, reading a story, playing a game of cards while the world outside was being torn apart. This created a sense of control and normalcy in the most abnormal of situations. The famous British stiff upper lip wasn't just a stereotype. It was a consciously deployed survival mechanism. It was the understanding that showing fear would only amplify it in others, especially children. In a crisis, panic got people killed. Rushing into the street, making poor decisions, freezing in place. These were fatal errors. Calm, practiced, deliberate action kept them alive. It was a mental discipline, honed night after terrifying night. The Blitz Survival Guide isn't just a fascinating piece of history. It's a timeless masterclass in urban disaster preparedness, applicable to earthquakes, hurricanes, power grid failures, or any major crisis. The principles are the same today. Secure your environment by knowing how to shut off your utilities. Have a designated safe room. Manage your resources like water and light. And above all, cultivate and maintain a calm, purposeful mindset. These civilians weren't heroes because they were unafraid. They were bone-weary, grief-stricken, and constantly terrified. They were heroes because they were terrified, and they planned anyway. They took action in the face of that fear. In the end, the most important survival tool wasn't the stirrup pump or the blackout curtain. It wasn't the Anderson shelter or the Morrison cage. It was the decision made in the calm before the storm that you would not be a passive victim. You would have a plan. You would practice that plan. You would take responsibility for your family's safety, using knowledge and preparation as your shield and sword. And that is a lesson in resilience, ingenuity, and courage that echoes far beyond the wail of any siren.